Our next value is justice. All right. We're going to take our four fingers, right? And then we're going to curl them into a fist and hold our fist up high. This is a sign of strength. We need to be strong to dismantle racism and to fight for justice. Justice. Number 5 is the value of generosity. Hold out your hand as though you're giving a gift. Generosity means to share the things that make a difference to others, like faith, presence, and resources. Generosity. Our next value is love. Aww. Hold up 6 fingers. Use your pointer finger on one hand to trace a heart in the center of the other hand. Love is at the center of all of our values. Love is the power that holds us together. Love. Remember I said there's like a little graphic and then all things are around it and there's one thing in the middle? That's love. Our 7th value is interdependence. This is a fancy word that means that we are all connected to each other. Is that your favorite one? Interdependence is a good choice. It's a really good one. All right, this is a fancy word that means that we're all connected to each other, as Josephine has just shared. Please hold up 7 fingers and put one of your palms this way, your open palms. And then imagine that you're this person. You take your little feet and you go up over here to your palm, and then you bend down. And you look at the web. See all the little details and lines in your hand? It's like a web full of connections. And this helps you to remember that we are all connected and dependent on one another. And that's how you can remember the value of interdependence. Those are our UU values. Let's review. 1, transformation. 2, equity. Very good. 3, pluralism. 3. No, we're doing 3. Everyone say pluralism together. 1, 2, 3. Pluralism. Yay. Number 4. Justice. There you go. 5. Generosity. Very good. Generosity. 6. Love. And 7. Yeah, great. So these are our values, and remember that love is at the center and runs through all of our values. You can carry love and our values in your open mind, your loving heart, and your generous hands. What will you use your values for today?
Thank you, Katie. As we move into our pastoral prayer or meditation, whatever suits your heart, UUA Minister Reverend Eric Cherry wrote this prayer or meditation and permits its use to be adapted to situations. The copy that I ran across was adapted to thinking about peace in Ukraine. And when I found this, I thought, we could probably use a little of that right now after watching the events of yesterday. So this is a peacemaking prayer. The history is complex. The politics are intense. The fear and anger are overwhelming, and the future is unclear. But glimpses of a hopeful vision will not be bombed into oblivion by anyone. In prayer or meditation, we call to mind the peacemakers, neighbors of differing faiths, with different histories, with different politics, with different emotions, who find room for each other in their hearts, in their dreams, and in their lives. Those who hold firmly to a vision of peace and justice anywhere in the world, but especially today in the United States of America, which doesn't feel very united right now. Spirit of life and love, be present with all who are fearful about our own civil violence. Lift up the hearts of those who fear legislators, be present with political leaders, ensuring a retreat from violence and a procession toward the peace table. Guide the hands of all those who are caring for the injured, the hungry, and the grieving, and open our own hearts to compassion. Remind us of our complicity and responsibility, and lead us towards generous engagement and move us always forward a vision of peace. So might it be. Let us enter into a time of silence, which we will close by singing together, voice still and small, number 391 in the early hymn. I will turn it over to Dr. Hill, whose sermon is called The Threat of Physical Violence in the USA.
Just get used to being like, is this on? Can you hear me okay? It's working? No, not at all. A little bit louder, Justin. So, how's that now? Any better?
Maybe it's not on.
Is there a button you need to press? Or?
I don't control it at all here.
Yeah. How's that? Try using this. Shall I use this?
Yeah.
Yes. Hang on, I'm just going to line myself up.
Or you can come over here. This one was working just fine.
Sure. I mean, I think this
That's
is
good.
This is working okay.
Okay.
Let's just. Let's see, how's that? Okay, hopefully there's no more of that electric sound. I think it might be if I'm near this. I'm just going to try one more time. Okay, I think we're fine. How's that now?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Well, look, firstly, thank you so much to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of New Orleans for inviting me. Thank you, Beverly, thank you very much for allowing me the chance to speak to your church and to all of you. And thank you all very much for coming on this hot July day. And yes, one cannot open a talk on the threat of political violence in the USA the morning after an assassination attempt of a presidential candidate without making reference to that. People have been remarking that this was a remarkably good PR for this talk. Honestly, I found it actually a little destabilizing because with these talks, I'm used to trying to sort of ease the audience in to the threat, so trying to not frighten people too much, but also not sound uncredible, talking about the extent of the threat of political violence. I sort of have to warm people up. What happened last night or yesterday has really kind of thrown that strategy out of the window, so I think I can just really get straight to it in terms of the depth and severity of the challenge that you all face and we face as Americans. Beverly's already introduced my background, so I won't steal time introducing myself any further. But what I will say is that at my organization, CPD, which was founded based on my experience working with the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, and based on the lessons of his statecraft and his peacemaking work, is that at the heart of what we do in my field and in my organization is that we attempt to always begin, when we're seeking a path out of violence or towards the prevention of violence, we always begin with the mindset of the people involved in the conflict. You have to begin with understanding the mindset and never presume that you understand it already, always presume that there are levels to it that you have not encountered, that you do not understand, even if you're very well read on the subject, until you are sitting with people who represent the movements that you're worried about or talking about, and until you engage with them in deep and sustained dialogue, it is only then that you'll begin to truly understand the mindset, motivations, ways of thinking, and also their own sense of strategy about their own future. So you really have to understand their own history and where they come from, and all the punctuation marks in their own story, which will be different to your own. And different communities have a different sense of history in their own world, and you have to begin with that intellectual history within the movement itself. And that is not easily done. You have to sit with the people you're talking about. You can't just talk about people, you have to talk to them. So that is a key fundamental feature of the way we work, and that's the basis of a lot of our strategic activity at CPD and in our partners in organizations around the world. And now, in the past, my work has been focused on the Middle East, the Balkans. I've done some work with the British government on Ukraine, but for quite some time, I have had the aspiration to start an American conflict prevention program. My interest in this actually began in 2015, long before we thought Donald Trump would even announce his candidacy, even before that. And people like myself and others who have spent time working on conflicts abroad had real concerns about the United States long before the wild 2015 and after election, due to issues of inequality, the extreme nature of that inequality, due to the dramatic shifts that were going on in Supreme Court rulings that were occurring, particularly after the Citizens United ruling. That was where I think a lot of people started really worrying about the destabilizing effects of that combined with the levels of inequality that were emerging in the United States around 2010 and after. And people like President Martti Ahtisaari, former president of Finland, came to the US, and I was at a banquet with him, and gave these kinds of warnings, saying, look, I've been working in development in places like Pakistan since I was in my early 20s, and everything I'm seeing here is worrying me. I saw audiences tend to yawn or switch off when people said this, and that is unfortunate, but now no one is yawning or switching off, especially after the jolt. That's sort of lightning bolt of horror that occurred yesterday with the assassination attempt. So anyway, just to get to the point about what we are doing in the United States at CPD, we are attempting, and have been attempting for the last 18 months, to set up a series of platforms of dialogue with all of the major extremist movements that are driving the United States towards deeper and deeper and worsening political violence. There are 4 real categories there, and that includes far-left threats of violence. The far-left problem is a real problem. There is a genuine threat of violence from far-left movements. There are ideological commitments to violence in that world that exists. But those movements are far less threatening to the United States political settlement than the far-right movements. So I'm going to concentrate on the far-right issues in this introductory talk. And I would break the far-right extremist movements into three categories. This is how we break it down in my organization. The first is you have the theocratic movement. Many of you, I think, or some of you attended a screening in this room with the Methodist Church on God and Country, which is about this issue. And it's been talked about a lot and has been raised more and more in the mainstream discussions, including movements like the Neo-Apostolic Reformation, which has a commitment to ideas like spiritual warfare. And Donald Trump's own spiritual advisor is an apostle from the Apostolic Reformation movement. So that's the theocratic side of things. The second one is Nazi movements and Nazi-inspired or Nazi-sympathetic movements that have a racial deterministic view of history and the future and their own political activism, combined with combining that pseudoscientific view of race with a deeply conspiratorial worldview as to the nature of the ultimate threat to the white race, which is the ultimate enemy is the Jewish race, which is seen as a superhero, supervillain, superhuman form, and also subhuman form of threat. And I'll come back to that in a second. And then the third category, and then this is a bit more controversial, but it has to be included on the list, is the plutocratic libertarian movement. I prefer to just call it the plutocratic movement, but I add a libertarian aspect to it just because it does help us think about who we're talking about. So to give the nuts and bolts of the plutocratic movement, this is not just Keynesian economics, Friedrich Hayek economics. This is a movement that is, and this we've spent time within this movement. I myself have as well. This is a movement that really has become dedicated to a real form of revolution. Okay. It's not just, a movement that is pro-economic reform. The objective is a genuine form of what they call constitutional revolution. So there's real revolutionary intent in that movement as well. It's built on the mindset of there being a society of makers and takers, that there is a small percentage of the country or any society that create, and close to half the country, or around 45% of the country, are just people who take. So the idea of makers and takers, that is the sort of moral philosophical underpinning of that movement. They don't take that often publicly, but it's there deep in the movement, and you see it sometimes in leaks or certain documents that come out from it. Another aspect of the movement is the belief that and this does come from people like Friedrich Hayek, the belief that any kind of regulatory market intervention in the free market is a slippery slope to some sort of totalitarian system. Now, it doesn't matter how history has passed that has not delivered that in Western liberal democracies. Nevertheless, that belief is still there, deep in the heart of that movement. Another factor about this movement that I want to really highlight is the raw and genuine dismissiveness of democracy in the country. That's been very clear when we spent time with people from this movement and on the Vargas now. They no longer feel like they're talking to outsiders. There is just a raw dismissiveness of the value of democracy. Democracy is this irrelevant or unnecessary hindrance to wealth creation. And democracy is just seen as an obstacle. The final point I want to highlight about the plutocratic movement is that the poster child plutocratic libertarian movement is one of the references they offer is all over their literature. And they were very involved with this in the 80s, is Pinochet in Chile. And people need to really realize what that indicates. Okay? Because the thing about Pinochet and the junta that overthrew the left-wing government in Chile is that they brought about what they regard as a poster child of constitutional revolution. They created a new constitution. They got rid of their enemies who opposed this constitutional revolution, which included, of course, dirty war tricks, these activities on a mass scale. And they created a new constitution that put certain business interests, plutocratic, rich interests, outside of the bounds of democratic policy. And that is what is seen so clearly as in the Pinochet example. And this isn't discussed nearly enough, understood nearly enough in terms of this aspect, this feature of the movement. And it also helps to understand why there is increasing convergence between the plutocratic movement and those other two movements I already mentioned, the theocratic movement and the racist, white supremacist, or white nationalist, Nazi adjacent movements. Because there is an alignment around the agenda of revolution, real revolution. And that's what we've seen in the last 10 years, is this acceleration of that alignment process between those three movements. And that is what we now see, is this increasing innovations in aligning those three movements. First real big step took place in 1980 with the Reagan campaign for the presidency, where there was this really huge change where a large number of evangelical churches agreed to drop the principle of not campaigning from the pulpit, right? And in return, the Reagan campaign said, campaign for me, basically the deal was, campaign for me, then I'm going to incorporate your religious goals into my politics. Abortion, in particular, being the top issue, but also the issues of separation of church and state, bringing evangelical Christianity to the heart of American politics and state structures. And Reagan offered that, and in return, they got boots on the ground and votes for what was essentially a libertarian agenda, libertarian economic agenda. So that was the first big sort of union of two of these movements. But what we've seen in the last, I would say, 10 years, maybe 12 years, is an increasing alignment between the three, particularly on the issue of conspiracy. The conspiratorial thinking of there being this evil plot at the heart of world power that we all live under comes from the Nazi movement. That is where it originates from, and the Nazi sympathetic movements. And Nazi movements in this country have, since the 40s, sought aggressively to infuse their ideas, to combine them with Christian movements. And mostly unsuccessfully, but in some fringe areas quite successfully. What's happened in the last 15 years, 12 years, I suppose, is that success has really taken off. And a lot of it is to do with the QAnon phenomenon. And the key thing to understand about the QAnon phenomenon is that QAnon really is a Nazi rebrand. It's a Nazi theory about the world with the sort of Nazi wording and Jewish wording taken out. But essentially, it's the same structure of belief about the way the world works. It's derived from Nazi theory about world power. And that QAnon view of the world has infused a large number of American evangelical churches. It has been infused. So we've seen that alignment as well. And finally, on the plutocratic movement, this is where I'll end here, so I'm sure I don't have time, but on the plutocratic movement, there's also been a shift towards conspiracy. Because when the libertarian economic ideas fail to deliver on the massive promises that the economists from that world promise, for example, you just need to cut regulation and taxes entirely, and then wealth will explode for everybody. When that doesn't happen, a scapegoat is needed for why that hasn't happened. Because the theory can't be wrong. Theory can't be wrong. And as a result, you see a tendency towards conspiracy in explaining that. So that's when you get arguments like the deep state catching on in libertarian movements. And the best example I have of that, the poster child for this, is Liz Truss, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, from a couple of years ago. The lettuce suit. She didn't last as long as the lettuce. Left out with a British joke, the shortest serving British Prime Minister. She came into power, not through an election, but through internal party conviction. She became Prime Minister, and then she announced an extreme libertarian budget at a time of serious inflation, serious household hardship. It was an astonishingly terribly political move to cut taxes and also cut welfare and benefits and services at the same time. Even lifelong conservatives were shocked by this decision, and it didn't unleash the economy. It caused the economy to crater, confidence in the British economy to crater, and that is why she had the shortest period of Prime Minister in British history. She is now on campaign saying the deep state is the reason this failed. Right? The deep state, the opposition in the civil service, and the orthodoxy of the past. There was a secret plot to make sure her brilliant theory that was clearly correct couldn't succeed. Now, it's not really working in Britain, but she is finding an audience in America, and that's where she's trying to sell the book now. So there is a fertile ground here for that kind of thing, more so than say in something like Britain, which just took a big lurch back to the left, which is I won't comment on the British yet. So here's what I'm saying is that these three movements shouldn't have anything to do with each other, but now they're very, very aligned in a lot of ways. Firstly, because they have a common enemy, which is the liberal and the secular framework of government, which brings with it democratic regulatory frameworks that protect consumers, citizens. And secondly, because there is this alignment around conspiratorial thinking that has been evolving and is now really accelerated in recent years. So that is this introductory framework I want to offer to you in terms of trying to get a handle intellectually on the nature of American extremism and where it's headed. And where it's headed is an increasing fusion of those three categories of right-wing extremism. So that's the main objective I wanted to land in on introductory remarks. And I'm sure there are lots of questions on various aspects of this movement and questions of what Americans can do. And I thought we could save that for the topic because I think we are all trying to work this out together. So I think something formal for that discussion would work on. Sure. But I think then my sort of more formal remarks here. Yeah. If I may just add a couple of baubles to the Christmas tree. Just takeaways. Is that all right? Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So the thing that I think one of the part of the history of these movements that my organization and I want to publicize and make general audiences more aware of are the origins of certain phrases that crept in to our politics that many of us are shocked by and don't understand the origins of. For example, you may have heard this phrase said more and more by mainstream conservative politicians in the last 5 years, that we're a republic, not a democracy. Have any of you heard this? Yeah. Did it surprise you when you first heard it? Or is it something that it surprised you? Yes. It surprised me too. I was like this, my whole life understanding what America is about. And also there's this concept of Christian nationalism as well, which is something surged in the last 5 years too. What I would say about both those concepts is they have roots in Nazi America. So the concept of republic, not democracy, the original phrasing, and I have a document, it's a 1958 American Nazi Party propaganda poster, and it says, I'm an American Nazi, Christianity is my faith, the American flag is my nation, and the swastika is the symbol of my race. Okay, that's what it says. If I had a projector, I would put this on the screen because I think it's really important. 1958. Under the message about America is my country, there's the phrase, we are a white republic, not a race-mixing communist democracy. That's the meaning of the phrase. That was why that phrase came together. It was anxiety about the desegregation policies that were surging after the Second World War. And it's the delegitimization of race-based theories of society that occurred. And the reaction to that was to try and piggyback on anti-communist sentiment, to try and blend these ideas with 1776 ideas. So it was an active attempt to create a sort of political, philosophical opposition to essentially a desegregated, multiracial society. So the idea of white republic was the sort of lifeboat for people of that. What we've seen is certain words have been dropped out of that phrase, but the central phrase is still there. Now, I'm not saying everyone who uses that phrase uses it knowingly in that way. Absolutely not. Lots of people think they sound smart saying it because they read a book that has nothing to do with racism talking about this. But I can assure you that that is the origin of the concept. What I would also say is one of the reasons it became a phrase that emerged in the 40s, 50s, and 60s was because of desegregation and civil rights. And the reason it's returning, I don't have any evidence of this, but my hunch, my suspicion as to why it's returned in the last 5-10 years is because we're heading towards something that all the white nationalists are very anxious about, which is the end of the white majority. And that is why it's turned against the idea of democracy, because democracy is seen in that movement as a simplistic, the majority has the privilege, which actually isn't true. That's incorrect analysis of the nature of democracy, but nevertheless, this movement sees it in its terms. So that is one of the Christmas tree baubles. The other one is the concept of Christian nationalism. I'm pretty sure the first time you see the phrase American Christian nationalism coined was by Gerald L.K. Smith in the 1940s. Gerald L.K. Smith was I wouldn't say he was full Nazi, but he was deeply Nazi-sympathetic, anti-Semitic conspiracy theorist. Used that really, really popular at far right circles in the 40s and 50s. And he's the one who started was involved in the start of the American First Party in the 40s, which is where the American First Party concept comes from, by the way. It came out of the American Bund Society, which was a swashbuckler organization that had the Madison Square Garden Nazi rally in 1938. So Gerald A. Smith came up with the idea of America First, again to mask the Nazi implications of the movement, And then he pivoted into Christian nationalism, the Christian Nationalist Party, as another way to master this. And I think it is not a coincidence that we see the return of this concept at the same time as the return of the concept of republican democracy. I think these things are deeply intertwined based on the legacy. So I just want to hand this out to you because people can spread the word about these and understand this movement better. We can more effectively respond and develop the antibodies necessary to take them on.
First question, when you can go ahead and come to Dylan, and then I'll manage to run behind that.
Hey, so, working now? Yeah. So I'm taking a new job working at an Episcopal school. It's fairly progressive, but they've had issues with some of the parents maybe not wanting trans and pride flags in the classroom. So from what I understand, 20-25% of parents are right leaning. But they had me read this book by Justin Lee, who is a gay evangelical man, and it's called Talking Across the Divide. I read the book. It was pretty easy to read. It wasn't really even written on a collegiate level. It feels like I'm an English teacher, so it seems like it was written on like a 10th or 11th grade reading level. So I'm reading it, but I'm a little bit worried about this concept that I call domestic appeasement. So I taught U.S. history a couple years ago when I worked in an alternative school, and so I heard about like Neville Chamberlain being an appeaser. So I'm worried that if myself or even more important people give right-wing extremists a platform, we are appeasing. What is the balance between open forum and appeasement that slowly leads into some kind of right-wing takeover? That's my question, I guess. What's a good balance there?
Thank you, Dylan. Yeah, thank you so much. It's a fantastic question, and it comes up a lot in my book, which is the balance between, well, we need to engage, but actually, are we accelerating? We accelerating the problem, we encouraging the problem. Going to a sort of 40,000 feet level, so avoiding this specific question for a second, what I would say is that, especially in a intra-societal conflict, as opposed to an interstate conflict, we're going to start with each other. You can't choose your family, you can't choose your neighbors, you can't choose the other members of your society. And there's teaching from the New Testament about handles, which the acceptance and love of your neighbor. So I think we have to, I think that is an important foundational basis for the question of what do we do about people who feel are unabsorbable with our own values, right? Now, what I would say is that every conflict that I've studied, every civil war, interstate style conflict, terrorism style conflict, every sort of extremist movement in those conflicts has been described in a way that we currently describe ISIS as unmovable, unreformable, unchangeable. The IRA, for example, was described exactly like this. People went to elaborately explain how their ideology meant they could not compromise. And the fact is, these are political movements, and political movements are strategic, and they can shift. It may be very hard to get there, but it is almost always possible, because ultimately political movements are movements that have their own power. Okay? So there's that factor. Finally, I would like to say the other issue is that these movements draw power from congregations, from communities, and those communities are often much more diverse in ideology than their leaders will. There's often a lot more diversity of opinion, a lot more room for flexibility in engaging to base support of these movements. So you look at the constituencies these extremist leaders build their power on, you'll often find a lot more diversity to get out of this explore. And that's the sort of secret. And again, Northern Ireland, that is the secret to dismantling extremism and extremist politics in Northern Ireland. It was moving into the sort of societal level and finding constituencies that were being dragged along with extremism because they felt like there was no other choice, because they saw the opponents being so dangerous. And this is where you have this reciprocal radicalization dynamic, where in Britain I saw this where far right were talking about Muslims being scary and we need to get rid of Muslims from the country. And Muslim radicals were recruiting would-be Al-Qaeda operatives, used the far right to explain to Muslims why they had to join Al-Qaeda, because this is a society that fundamentally rejects. So that's the typical radicalization dynamic, which feeds off itself. So that's also known as the horseshoe theory of extremism, and you have to break the horseshoe. And the way to do that is to get into the underbelly of extremism. Start looking for people you can work with who actually aren't as extreme as the leaders could make them. I would say that probably in every single case I've seen, you will always find constituencies.
So you talk a lot.
You talk a lot in your, the beginning, you talk about kind of the plutocrats, which is great, and I encounter them at the university all the time. But I think, when I think about my friends in Louisiana, most of their encounters is with old friends from school or neighbors or family, and so I'm wondering, and those, as you suggest, seem the movable ones, the movable plutocrats are. And I'm wondering if you have like suggestions or other kind of local organizations that are doing some of this kind of work, so that if people, let's say, are going and visiting family or going and visiting friends or engaged in social media, like how do you begin that conversation with that bridge? Given that I think for most people here, they both want to, but feel like it's running your head into the wall.
So what I'd say then generally is that in terms of the sort of what to do question is most of the padding and the sort of popular mass support that the three movements I mentioned enjoy. It's in large part from the fact that the real deeper violent radicalism is pretty good. Okay? It's actually pretty good. The extent of the radical intent is pretty well masked by the sort of hardcore of these movements. Now, the objective is to radicalize as many people as possible. If you're a Nazi white supremacist type, you want, and you're a mainstream, not a vanguardist, you want to mainstream these ideas. You want to draw as many people as possible into your radical worldview. But from the plutocratic libertarian side of things, there are a lot of people who have been carried along with the libertarian philosophy who aren't really aware of the extent of the radical intent of the sort of godfathers of that. I think there's a lack of awareness of that. Similarly, I think in the theocratic sort of category, I know you're asking about the third category, but I think we should talk about the group. In the theocratic category, there are a lot of people who are part of these sort of Apostolic Reformation and Apostolic movement churches that talk the language of spiritual warfare. But when you actually engage with the congregants, it's full of lovely people. It's full of lovely people who do talk about immigration is a problem, right? Let's think about the story of Mary and Joseph looking for a place looking for sanctuary. So you'll find that in those movements. But the thing about those kinds of Christian movements is they're very cult-like in terms of how they're controlled. And the social costs of contradicting the political narrative are enormous, right? So that's how it's handled in those churches. So I would say that all three of those movements actually have mass support pattern that is very gettable if we engage in a compassionate and open-hearted way with the sort of fringes of those movements that actually aren't as bad as the people that follow. And part of that comes from the fear of the left. The fear of the left drives it on into these more extreme alternatives. And so breaking that down, breaking down that reciprocal radicalization, breaking down that horseshoe is really important. In terms of organizations doing this, that is one of the things we're trying to set up at CPD. We're trying to see new ways of working because just the audience, my question moved up here. I'm not now talking to you. So just why I'm looking up here. Just so.
Not to the Lord.
Yeah, that's right. I'm following him around the room. But no, in terms of the sort of what sort of activities need to be seeded, this problem will not. This is a 50-year challenge. It's taken 50 years to get there. This is deep roots in American history and in American movements. A lot of it hidden until recently, but it's deep. It's going to take a similar amount of time to recover, American normality and civic, liberal secular politics, right? So it's going to take a long campaign, and that's not going to come from just left-wing response alone. This is a problem that needs to be solved by the right itself from within the right. So movements that are by the right, of the right, for the right, who want to take this on, need to be created, constructed, encouraged, supported. Because that is the long-term way we get out and grow out of this problem as a nation. And that's based on my understanding. So that's, I haven't quite answered your question precisely, but I'm giving you the sort of general direction and hope that it can inspire your own ideas.
We'll take one more question for this part, and then, right?
Has anyone considered the parallels between what's going on today and in the 60s and 70s?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's clearly, there are clearly, is that your full question?
Yes.
And do you want to add anything else to that? Because it seems like you have some thoughts.
Well, the main one is that in the 60s and 70s, there was from my vantage point, there was a biological rebellion against collective society. Because collective society tends to tamp down individuality. The same thing, it seems to me, is happening again.
So yeah, I do think there are parallels to the 60s and 70s. I might not frame it in exactly the same labeling as you, but I think you're on to something very important, which is the age-old struggle between the importance of the sort of collective interests and the importance of individual interests, right? This goes back to John Locke, the struggle between individual rights and society's rights, or a nation's rights. Yes. So absolutely, this is another manifestation of that. But what I would say that is somewhat different is the role of political parties in this role. Yes, and I think especially the role of the Republican Party in this situation, but also the role of business leaders and rich families that are involved in this time. There's a much stronger sense of them being determined to drive us in a certain radical direction, as than there was, I think, in the 60s and 70s, in terms of that sort of class of in the American political space. And I think that's not a coincidence that we have a Republican Party now that is much more captured by that kind of agenda. Those things are relevant.
So our closing now.
Thank you very much. Next to you.
Generosity is a spiritual discipline, and we can now practice our act of giving either by placing your offering in the collection plate or by using the information in the folder service to give electronically. Gifts to this community of faith are gratefully received. Let us acknowledge these gifts by reading together the words in our order of service. This gift from the abundance of my heart blesses me, our ministries, and the world. Giving in the offering plate and pledging are part of how we steward our congregation. There are countless other ways to serve, build community, and share our love with the rest of the city. There are some opportunities. You may have missed the ice cream social yesterday at the Gillespie Center Community Memorial Community Breakfast. It was delightful. I ate way too much ice cream. They are back on track. That was their first meeting in the fellowship hall. glitches worked out, we think, and it was a delightful social event. We'll be back with other programs monthly. What you watch for, what we're going to be doing along with all of UUA at the end of September, the weekend of September 28th, 29th. We don't have all the details yet. The social justice team is working with it, the worship team, and hopefully we'll be doing something with community and North Shore too. And it's a environmental justice revival. And with program materials supplied by UUA, and will be happening at churches, at UUA churches all over the nation. And certainly, if there were a dead center of environmental lack of environmental justice, South Louisiana would be the spot. So I'm hoping that we get a lot of community attendance from that too. Did any other announcements? And that will include our programs as part of that. So I don't think we have any other announcements. If you'll stand in body and spirit and join our chalice extinguishing.
Wish this, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of faith. These carry our hearts until we are together again.
By way of benediction, I've combined, sorry. Don't turn the step over you, lady.
Please remain standing as we sing our closing hymn, number 318, We Will Be.
Appreciate you. You've been here and saying, and being patient with me. So I've combined sort of two sets of words for the benediction, beginning with a poem that's been attributed to a lot and finally given to Anonymous, and then ending with words that Reverend Paul used to use. If there is to be peace in the world, there must be peace in the nations. If there is to be peace in the nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there is to be peace in the cities, there must be peace between religions. If there is to be peace between religions, there must be peace between neighbors. If there is to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. If there is to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. This church is a place we live our lives. Wherever and however we gather, we bring and share the spirit of love and life and peace. Let us invite that spirit of peace to fill us now as we enter into the next few months. Please turn and greet your neighbor. And the way to the coffee is down the hall. Come into the fellowship.